quickly, my name is Steve Hall. I'm the director of Cognizant's Enterprise Mobility Architecture Group. So I have on my team a bunch of enterprise mobility architects. We're basically enterprise architects with a mobility slant. We work with companies to help figure out, how mobile applications are going to integrate into all of their back-end systems, how to secure them, what types of changes and developments have to occur within an enterprise to make mobile applications really fit in the enterprise, be secure, figure out how to deploy them, test them, all those types of things. I have quite a long experience with mobility. I go back to mobility probably about 1998, I guess, and have worked with a lot of different mobile platforms. I always tell people, though, really, the last 2 or 3 years in enterprise mobility is really what matters. Previously in mobility, a lot of niche applications. Certainly there are very, very mission-critical applications around mobility in the last 10 or 15 years. A lot of service applications, field service, field sales, those types of things, where mobility has been very successful. But bringing those devices in the enterprise and having them, employees interact with devices on a day-to-day basis, use them as productivity devices, productivity applications, just really hasn't happened. And we all know, why that trend is occurring now, because of the devices and the operating systems available to us. So really, it's the last 2 to 3 years in enterprise mobility that really make a big difference. So despite having nearly 15 years of mobility behind me, I really look at the last 2 to 3 years as being the game changer in determining how we use mobility in the enterprise. We're going to talk a little bit about trends impacting the enterprise. This presentation is about strategy. I'm sorry if you're wanting to look at code today. I might have a little code for you, but very little. We're going to look at strategy. Why we need a strategy. What it means. A lot of companies I talk to. I met with 104 different clients in the last 12 months to talk about mobility. So CIOs, VPs, directors of companies, all these companies trying to grasp and grapple with what they do from a mobility perspective in their enterprise. And this is a really, really challenging time for them, because you see this influx of devices in the enterprise, people wanting to use devices to conduct work wherever, whenever they want. And the enterprises, in a lot of respects, aren't ready for this. This is something that has just occurred for them. And so it's a challenge for them, and they need to figure it out. And to develop 1 or 2 or 3 applications doesn't impact an enterprise heavily, but when you start seeing 5, 10, 50 mobile applications, and you don't have a strategy in place, you're in big trouble. And so this is one of the things Cognizant works with our customers to figure out and make sure that there is a strategy in place to all of this great innovation that happens in mobility. So we'll talk about the elements of that strategy and really where to start on that. Just very quickly, a little bit about Cognizant. Cognizant's been around since 1994. We were really a spin-off of an IT group within Dun & Bradstreet. We're a US company based in Teaneck, New Jersey. We are just, I think, right around 160,000 employees now. When I joined about 2.5 years ago, Cognizant was just turning 100,000 employees. So in a little over 2 years, we've added nearly 60,000 people to the company. Cognizant knows a thing or two about scaling things. That's one of the things we do well for our customers, is figure out how to solve problems and being able to scale with the resources in order to solve those IT challenges. We have about 50 development centers in 25 countries or so, and we do business. We've done business with customers in 40 countries around the world. Of course, Cognizant's divided into a lot of different types of groups. We focus on our industry verticals. We have very strong banking and financial, insurance, life sciences, healthcare practices, technology vertical focuses, even entertainment and media, and life sciences. Cognizant Mobility was formed as a horizontal. We really serve all of those different industries. So we talk to organizations really cross industry. And we have a number of services in our group, and as an architect, and my architecture group really crosses in almost all of these services. Services like strategy, as I mentioned, helping customers figure out, how and why to deploy mobility. Our largest group, certainly delivery. This is, the coding group. We work across a wide variety of platforms. Pretty much any major mobile platform that is in the market today, we work with. It's part of our solutions to our customers. So we have a very good real-world experience of working with every one of these platforms and development approaches, and knowing what works and what doesn't. With hundreds of applications behind us now, and many, many deployments of these platforms, we have a very good track record of looking back and saying, well, why is that platform working for that person but not that one? Or what did we learn from this type of deployment and this type of strategy that was implemented that we can take into other industries? And so those are some of the things I'm hoping to relay to you today a little bit. The testing group at Cognizant Mobility, I think this test cloud announcement, because we grapple with this problem that Nat described this morning about testing across all these different devices and what that really means. We have a very good testing group. It's a very strong practice for us. I think they're going to be blown away when they see the test cloud and being able to bring that into our practice as well. That's just a phenomenal approach to testing. So I know this is, in general, this is kind of a developers forum, if you will, the Xamarin conference, a lot of people heavy in the code. So I wanted to give you something. Like I said, it's not going to be much. So you get one snippet of code today. Well, kind of, a code block. And really, this is my disclaimer message for you. I want to talk a little bit about enterprise mobility, but of course, every enterprise is different. And I want to make sure that you look at things and see some of the information and some of the ideas, and understand that some of this may apply very well to your organization, and to other organizations, there's a different set of trends or parameters that are in place. So you want to make sure that you take that into consideration. So one of the things when we create a strategy, we have to understand some of the factors that are in place. When a business is thinking strategically, what are they thinking about? They think about things how they want to grow. What are the market forces in place? How does global competition, the increasing globalization, fit into the picture? Consumer spending habits, economic indicators, those types of things, all sort of are influences on the strategy. Those are things you really have to take into consideration. There are two areas I want to focus in today. One is the people factors, and one is technology. How do those two elements play into defining your enterprise mobile strategy? And Cognizant has a campaign. If you go to our website, cognizant.com, Future of Work, that URL will take you to some of our research around some of these trends and how they impact what we call the future of work. The future of work tries to look out and forecast a little bit about what things will change in the enterprise and impact how people work. So this campaign brings a point of view into the changes occurring in the workplace. So let's first look at people and see what kind of changes we're going to see in the workplace just around people. And in order to do that, we have to take a little step back and say, well, who's in the workplace today? Well, there are a ton of baby boomers in the workforce population today. Baby boomers born between 1946 and 1964. The oldest of the baby boomers is at retirement age. So we are just seeing in the last year or two here the first set of baby boomers entering retirement in mass. And there's a long string of baby boomers in the next 15 years or so that are going to follow them into retirement. So that that's certainly going to impact the workforce because baby boomers represent a tremendously large section of the population. So there are vacancies, and of course those vacancies have to be filled. And the vacancies are you know, the next generation following behind the baby boomers are what's termed the millennials. Millennials are typically classified as being born in the late 70s, early 80s, up until about the year 2000. And so what is unique about that next generation that's coming into the workforce, and how is it going to impact what we do in our workplace and how we work? Well, the first thing to understand about millennials is they're digital natives. These people have never known life before a cell phone or the internet. They've always had those two things. They understand very well how to use this technology. 95% North American millennials have a cell phone. 70% laptop, 23% tablet, a high percentage of mobile users. They are very comfortable in using technology. You know, contrast that with people who entered the workforce and had never really used a computer. You know, a lot of baby boomers, especially the oldest of baby boomers, came into the workforce. They didn't have anything on their desk. You know, a notepad, some index cards, a pencil, paper. You know, technology, they evolved around the technology in the workforce. Millennials have already experienced it. There are very few 13-year-olds today that don't have a mobile phone. And all of those people are coming into the workforce knowing already how to use this technology. And they want to use this technology. They think it's crazy that they can't leverage some of this technology. Not only have they had technology, but they've seen the technology, the power of this technology increase dramatically over their lifespan. So they have access to enormous processing power, the ability to consume media whenever and wherever they like. You know, for me, the idea of being able to stream video, even at a computer, let alone a mobile device, growing up would be just a pipe dream. This is accepted as standard practice today. They have access to enormous potential in power, network speeds, and of course are able to communicate with people all over the world effortlessly. When they're in an online chat or a social media conversation, it doesn't matter if that person's next door around the world. There's nothing there are no barriers to that communication for this millennial generation. And of course, millennials are socially connected. More so than any other demographic, millennials are members of more social networks, use the social networks, are social network savvy, understand the culture and the sort of rules around using social networks and communicating with people in social networks. So what does this mean for the workplace? Having millennials who are these digital natives, socially connected, used to having the power at their fingertips in order to do things whenever and wherever they want. What are their expectations? Well, first off, and this really applies today, not only with millennials, but even baby boomers, is this whole Sunday evening, Monday morning experience. And this is the whole idea that, you know, you use these great devices at home, you have your iPhone, Android, iPad, and you can get all these great things done, and then Monday morning you show up at work, you turn on your desktop PC, you wait 5 minutes for it to boot, log in, go through its virus checks, and then you're locked into a system that's really inhibits you from doing a lot of the things you just did all weekend long. Reaching out to your social network, leveraging communications tools in order to contact people all over the world and help you in performing your work. And so people, of course, are creative, right? They find a way to get things done. So what happens? When they need to do something and their work environment prohibits them from doing it, they take out their cell phone, they take out their iPad, they're off the company network. They go and look up whatever they need, the information they need. They contact somebody, whoever they need, and get the job done. Because that's what people want to do. They want to get things done. They also, of course, don't want to carry multiple devices around. So you might have your corporate BlackBerry, let's say, for email access, and you've got your Android phone for all your homework, and now you've got two devices to charge and take care of and carry around with you, which is cumbersome. So as more and more people leverage their own devices and bring in their own devices into the enterprise, what happens? A new trend emerges, and BYOD is born. And bring your own device trend is an unstoppable train. You know, at this point in time, you know, at Cognizant, we talk to a lot of CIOs, and this is something they grapple with heavily: is how do we handle BYOD? And of course, we have a lot of products that can support BYOD initiatives to make sure we have the controls, management, and security around these devices. But this is very difficult to secure a personal device. So from a strategy standpoint, we have to look at you know, that millennial generation coming in. We have to look at the devices that are coming into the company, this BYOD trend, and make sure we take that into consideration. So what other trends are we seeing? Beyond BYOD, we have the consumerization of IT. You know, just more and more people using personal devices. The idea, and in the keynote this morning, touched on this, the bar that's set because of the consumer experience. We expect that same bar to be set now in the enterprise. And so, you know, the going from sort of that green screen all the way up to where we are today in our enterprise apps and what's expected from a user experience, the bar is pretty low in a lot of cases. And don't get me wrong, there are some fantastic development shops at companies we go into and we talk to, and they are using a really high caliber set of tools. But if you average this out, the bar is pretty low. So the consumerization of IT and seeing what's out in the consumer world today and the great applications we have to leverage really set the bar high. Extending the enterprise, well, what does that mean? Well, you know, your enterprise isn't just about your employees. A lot of virtual corporations, being able to leverage your business partners as part of your strategy on how you do business. How do I share information with my business partners? How do I make sure that they have access to critical information so that they can supply me my parts I need or handle some customer requests, just integrate our information channels? How can I do that? And certainly mobility can help out here. And from a support perspective, just the infrastructure and the need for supporting your users, your employees. I now have my iPhone. It's connected to my corporate email. And oh yeah, I'm using Evernote, and I'm using a handful of other consumer apps to help me do my job better. But now who's going to support that? And so there has to be some, where, you know, enterprise support organizations are having to field phone calls on why my iPhone isn't syncing with my email and why I seem to be out of space and what do I do? And, you know, so the support of apps that are being brought into the enterprise is a challenge for corporations. One of the other trends that's kind of interesting is gamification. And now gamification is, I actually have this idea how I want to approach gamification in the enterprise. Gamification is kind of a cool concept. It's this whole idea of using an application more fun, right? So if I'm a salesperson, maybe I have a mobile app that lets me, you know, make it more fun to go out and sell a little bit harder. Wow, if I could just push my sales force to just sell one more widget this month, how can I do that? And typically you have sales incentive programs and so on, but how do you implement it? How do you measure it? Are there ways to do that? And gamification can fall into that category too. I have this different idea, and I'm looking for feedback on it. I want gamification to be a first-person shooter. So in order to do anything in your workforce that day, you have to like progress through levels and, you know, oh, file the reports. Okay, well I gotta get to level 3 to you know, file the reports. So you know, if in order to file the TPS reports, I got to pass through level 3 of the zombies and be able to get to that particular button on the screen in order to do this. So I know it's not quite the most efficient level, but this is kind of what I'm looking for in gaming. So we have smart device technology, we have a convergence of many enterprise trends, and we have an up-and-coming workforce of digital natives. And we can't always, we certainly can't neglect the fact that enterprises need to streamline their operations. So what kinds of things can we do to help streamline the operations, drive innovation? What should enterprises do? Enterprise really needs to address this strategically. You know, I think, and we're seeing this certainly more and more as people or enterprises' mobile maturity extends. But the blinders have to come off about mobility. Mobility is a strategic technology for nearly any enterprise out there on a global basis. And as was mentioned also in the keynote, when you look at the impact mobility has in the developing world as well, this is a key factor. So if you're a global company developing applications for your consumers, for instance, what deployment mechanism are you going to use? Are you going to deploy it through a web? Are you going to give them that kind of channel? Well, that might be fine, but you better consider that a lot of the world is going to use their mobile device to access that site. So whatever information you put out there or transactional system you put out there, if you're going to reach those people in those developing countries, they're not going home to their desktop PC. They have their mobile device. That's their primary channel of interacting with the world. So in defining your strategy, we look at this from a couple of elements at a high level. First is a mobility council, and when we talk to companies about what a mobility council is, it's really a cross-section of the organization. It's not just IT, it's not just business. What other functions are there in the enterprise that are really important to bring into your strategy as you're defining your strategy to make sure all elements are covered well? We have, like I mentioned, IT and the business units, certainly. They're very good at working hand in hand. They know each other well. But we also need to look at marketing. How you brand these applications, or legal. What are the legal ramifications of deploying mobile applications internally to your business partners, to your consumer audience? So getting and developing that cross-section of your enterprise and making sure that they're all working together in order to define what the elements in the roadmap are for the strategy is very critical. And from that roadmap perspective then, you know, how do you determine what's the right duration here? When you look at the action items and priorities you're going to have out of developing that mobile strategy, you know, looking to figure out, you know, how far to look forward into the future, what types of things you're trying to accomplish, and then what are the steps involved early on to make sure that you have those early successes and can capitalize on your strategy. And last but not least, of course, in strategy is your technology. What type of technology you're going to implement? You know, you know, it goes without saying, every time we talk to an organization about mobile technology, is it HTML5? Is it native? Is it hybrid? Is it some kind of mobile platform? What are we going to use for the technology? But it goes beyond that. That's just one element of your mobile enterprise strategy. You've got to figure out how you're going to support those users, how you're going to authenticate users to your system, what kind of security is in place, what kind of platform you're going to have in order to integrate your mobile applications to your back-end systems, ERP or otherwise. So all of those components are very critical at a high level in order to define your strategy. But actually, there's a lot of other things to keep in mind. And this is our periodic table of the elements of enterprise mobility. And it does a fairly good job of identifying a lot of the key things we really look at when we're in workshops or strategy sessions with the customers to figure out, all right, we're developing a strategy here. What are the other things we have to look at? What are the important things? And of course, we want to prioritize these things. We want to have the strategy have business impact. We want to drive innovation. How do we set up things so that we're doing that? And how do we do this in a controlled manner? What kind of standards and governance do we need in place? Depending on the type of enterprise you have, you may be highly regulated. So, you know, somebody in the life science field, a medical device manufacturer, or a pharmaceutical company, you know, high regulation. That's a very different set of standards and governance required than maybe another typical enterprise. Looking at design and branding, how are you going to incorporate those elements into your mobile strategy? How many times do you want to sort of create the template or a design for an enterprise app? You may want to make some investments early on so that you have these templates, so that you can stand up apps quicker, and they still are very attractive, engaging user experiences. I also think it bubbles up the need, as we talk about these things, for design to be incorporated in the day-to-day development activities. And that's something that in typical enterprise mobility or typical enterprise application development, we haven't seen in the past. It's rare that certainly user experience can come into play to make sure that you have a well-designed applications users can use and navigate through and so on. But if you look at a traditional desktop enterprise application, it's rare that you brought in the digital agency to come in and figure out what colors palette you're going to use for your application. No, your developer did it. And there are some developers who are really good at that, but in some organizations, certainly we need to elevate the level of design in order to hit that bar. So UI, UX, of course, legal. Which devices and operating systems are you going to support? And once again, we see some biases in some industries or organizations. Oh, you know, that OS isn't secure enough for enterprise use yet. Oh, we're just going to be, you know, we're going to do an iOS only shop for the time being. We're not going to adopt BYOD, or well, it's BYOD as long as it's Android, or whatever the case may be. Understanding the devices you're going to support is going to be very important for your strategy, because of course you have to look at your tools you're going to use as well, which is why people are so interested in tools like Xamarin, is because you can use it as a cross-platform development tool and not be locked into one particular device or OS. How will your apps be supported and maintained? You know, the release cycles of mobile applications are typically much more frequent. You know, new features are added, updates. Of course, we have operating system updates on the device side and so on, and some things that worked fine in one release don't work so hot in the next one. And of course, we're targeting a user base with a wide variety of operating system versions, device capabilities, screen sizes. So as as new devices come into the marketplace or into your service umbrella for your employees, we have to make sure we can support, maintain, create new releases. When the CEO comes in with a new device and his application that worked fine on his iPad doesn't work on his new iPad. So understanding how that's all going to fit into your strategy and making sure you have the right people behind that. And finally, how do you foster a culture of innovation? You know, you don't want to lock people into one way of doing things necessarily, but IT needs its governance. You need those standards in place so you can scale. You can build more applications, but you don't want to stop people from innovating, and I'll touch on that in just a little bit here. One of the things we also see is a little pushback sometimes in the enterprise. It's just an app. It's a small screen. How hard can it be? Why would we need a strategy behind something when it's seemingly so simple? My 12-year-old daughter developed an iPhone application in 2 weeks. She calls it iBurp. It's awesome, you know. She's made $45 in the App Store on it. You know, we certainly hear these things, but we're not talking about convenience apps in the enterprise. Enterprise apps are developed for a very specific purpose. And these are often, and more so now, mission critical, can't live without it, applications that enterprises need to support and maintain and manage the whole life cycle of that application. So why are people developing mobile apps? You know, this is always interesting because we hear a lot of things, maybe even wrong reasons why people are developing mobile applications. You know, certainly some of these are truly accurate. You know, your competition is doing it. Is that a good reason to do it? It may be. You know, from a marketing perspective, if I'm a salesperson and my competition has a mobile app and I don't, well, how do I look now? In front of the customer, I don't look maybe as innovative. So this can be a very valid reason in developing an app, but maybe not the primary reason we should look at developing mobile apps. Many times, why are you developing an app? Well, our executives all have iPads. They all went out and bought them, you know, so we need apps. They want to see the reports, and they want to see forecasts, they want to see business intelligence types of things on their iPads. So that's the driver behind all of this. You bought a Meep. You know, you figured you really wanted to go out and bring mobility into your enterprise, so you started by just going out and buying an enterprise mobile platform, figuring that was the best place to start. Worse yet, you were sold a Meep. And that's when some high-level relationship with a software vendor creates demand, artificial demand for a mobile enterprise platform. And all of a sudden, the IT department, a gift from the sky comes in the form of a Meep, and they've got to figure out what to do with it. And of course, as mentioned, just looking innovative, right? We want to look as innovative as possible. But why should we develop these apps? You know, if we take a step back and get away from the sort of knee-jerk reaction behind developing apps, what are really some of the good reasons to develop applications and thus help form our strategy around? Well, streamlining processes, certainly. You know, these devices have a unique capability that we can use and leverage in order to streamline business processes. Extending previous systems investments. This is in an enterprise, actually this is a fantastic place to leverage mobility. All your back-end ERP systems that have terrible user interfaces, overload of data, to complete any task, you do mouse click through 15 screens and 49 clicks in order to complete any action. And guess what? But the business process is sitting back there. So you don't necessarily want to rewrite those systems. Those systems can still live and breathe and be maintained for quite a long time, but you can change them from a user perspective, and that is to bring in mobility and paint a new, basically a new interface that's streamlined for the way people conduct business. So I no longer have to maybe see as much data on the screen or sift through as much detail. I can really streamline the UI and that user experience so that it leverages my SAP backend in the way I do my business. Not the way the system wants me to do business, but the way I do my business. And I can have different views for different roles. You know, so my sales people see one view, my executives see another view, all sharing the same back-end system, but their view and how they interact with it is very different. Competitive advantage. Mobility allows us to be more agile. We can do things in a different way with mobility that can drive that innovation, and we can get there quicker with mobility in some respects. Employee satisfaction, you know, the whole BYOD trend and what millennials expect when they join the workforce. You know, they want to have the best tools and the best user experience as they're doing their jobs to help them perform better. And of course, serving our customers better. Customers love mobility, right? They want to be able to access your company's information, their shopping cart, or you know, your customer service department in multiple ways. So mobility doesn't necessarily do away with all these other channels. You know, you have your call centers and your voice response systems and your web interfaces to your customers, but it's a channel that they expect. And so how when you form your strategy are you going to manage all of those channels and make sure you don't have 16 different unique ways of doing things, but you still deliver that promise of a great user experience on top of each one of those channels? And the holy grail, of course, of mobility is to develop new lines of business. not just what we do today, but what, because of the unique characteristics of the mobile devices, mobile operating systems, and the people who use them, can we bring in to develop new lines of business, create more business value? So going back to technology again, let's talk about enterprise mobility's silver bullet. This is what every CIO hopes to achieve in looking at what technology to implement. And so I thought I'd share it with you today. We'll just cut to the chase and eliminate a lot of ambiguity out there with respect to what platform and technology you should implement. HTML5. It's what everybody wants, right? It's cross-platform. It's location-aware. It's with HTML5 extensions. It's mobile-centric. Canvas object for nice graphing and animations, offline data, CSS. It is a thing to behold, and enterprises love it. And so, and I say this sincerely, HTML5 should be used everywhere in the enterprise because of just those things. Everywhere, you don't need a premium user experience, high-performance apps, offline data and synchronization, manageable code, push notifications, single code base for all devices, and high security. Those are the things that are in the way of using HTML5. So despite HTML5 having this promise in the enterprise, it really struggles to deliver. And like I said, I buy into an HTML5 first strategy. It would be the ideal opportunity to deploy a lot of applications for many, many reasons. But you've got to be able to back away from that idea of deploying things in HTML5 very quickly when you realize that your applications are going to outperform, or the expectations of your applications are going to outperform what HTML5 can deliver. And too many organizations have gone down this path only to have to back off and say, you know what, that's really not working for us. And the reason, and even applications that start out as a good fit for HTML5 in their current iteration lose out long term because applications are living, breathing creatures, and they tend to grow in capabilities and scope and handle new functions on the device. And all of a sudden, that HTML5 app that you developed that worked well for your users needs a new screen that leverages device capability that HTML5, even with a hybrid wrapper, doesn't deliver for you. And so there is a fit for HTML5 in the enterprise, unquestionably. But you also have to recognize very quickly and have that checklist, and even if it's a mental checklist, just to say, when does it not apply? And to be able to back off and say, let's not even go there. It doesn't work because we need a premium user experience for this app. It doesn't work because we do need to synchronize data, and data synchronization in HTML5 is a real challenge. So your field service force that needs offline data, well, if they have a lot of data on their device, it can be a real challenge. I'm not saying these things haven't been done, can't be done, but there are easier ways to do them. Let's say that. So as your mobile footprint grows, your tools and approach also have to keep up with your strategy. Dev teams need to be skilled in mobility, yes, but they also need to be skilled in many things more, right? You're not just talking about, in an enterprise app, you're typically not talking about a standalone app. It usually integrates with something else, whether it be cloud-based or your enterprise system-based. So it's very important to have that team that understands all the components around enterprise application development, and of course your mobile experts as well. And one of the things that we often find in enterprises building up their capabilities around mobility is really their environment. The ability to develop applications and test them within your enterprise, and to get that whole mindset started about making sure that you're going about it the right way. A good example is around security and networking. Your enterprise apps are typically going to be used within the walls of your enterprise, as the person leaves your enterprise, at the Starbucks down the street, at their home, 3G, 4G networks, Wi-Fi, through your corporate VPN potentially. So you have all these different scenarios of how your application is going to be used or where it's going to be used and what network it's on. And this can really be a crazy thing initially for a lot of enterprises because their networks and the security on their networks aren't built like this initially. You know, their front gate, their front door to the world is their web server. Everything sits behind there. We need to expose web services to that frontier so that these mobile applications can interact with them. And that, like I said, is just not something a lot of enterprises are at the point of having or are mature in their infrastructure to support those, secure those, and know what the risks are in implementing. You know, making sure you have your build servers. You know, we're in a cross-platform world, so if you're going to support iOS, Android, and other Windows or any other devices, you've got to make sure you have the infrastructure to support your build environment, which means you're going to have a Mac in your enterprise. You'd be amazed at the number of enterprises this causes just incredible consternation in. You know, that it just doesn't work for some reason. They're just not allowed in the enterprise. And so oftentimes we'll see you'll go into a development floor of an office building and all the developers sit. There's cubes everywhere, everybody's at their PC. And there's one cube sitting all alone, nobody in it. And there's a rejected, thrown away monitor somebody recycled and an old keyboard and a mouse from like the 1980s plugged into a Mac Mini. And that is the lone build station for the enterprise as far as you know, supporting their iOS applications. Certainly you need that skill set in-house to make sure that you have iOS skills as well as Android skills and any other device skill set that you're leveraging in creating these cross-platform mobile applications. So even tools like Xamarin, which simplify things greatly, certainly, you still need that iOS and Android SDK skill set. So making sure you have the right skill sets on board is very critical. Leveraging components and libraries, you know, these are things you can do from external, like Xamarin Component Store and other places, third-party components, and the libraries you build yourselves as well. And this is one of the very interesting things I think about Xamarin. Xamarin, I think, promotes or has the ability to promote greater reuse of code and the development of enterprise libraries than any tool I've seen in the mobile space. And we've worked with a lot of tools. So being able to take patterns and develop once and reuse them across multiple applications works so well in this tool set as opposed to many other tool sets, which is really something enterprises look for. You know, how can we write less code, maintain less code? You know, code is bad, right? You want to maintain as little code as you can, so the quicker you can get there and the fewest lines of code to maintain is always a good thing. So let's talk about devices for just a second, because this is another part of the technology that makes a big difference in determining your enterprise strategy and how you're going to go through your enterprise roadmap. The networks today, LTE networks, you know, 20 megabits of data transfer. This is incredible in the palm of your hand to have that kind of speed on a mobile device. Multi-core CPUs now, more and more RAM. You know, we had all of that in our desktop environment. You know, we had fast networks, we have fast CPUs, we have a lot of RAM, all those things like that. So what is different about a mobile device that we can actually think differently with? Mobile devices have things that desktop computers just don't. They have imaging, they have a camera. They have all these sensors that can detect motion, magnetism, proximity, humidity, barometric pressure, light, sound, and temperature. So the GPS being location aware, and gestures, new ways of interacting with the UI and with an application. So one of the things that everybody should challenge themselves is what do we do with all that? What can we take all that power wrapped up in that handheld device and do really unique and innovative things within the enterprise. And to steal a line from Spider-Man, with great power comes great responsibility, because we still have to manage this from an IT perspective. We need to make sure that all of that, the power isn't sort of misused or mishandled in a way. So IT has to have that governance and be able to support your framework around mobility, but you don't want to stifle the innovation. So this is what we call our freedom within a framework. IT owns the outside pieces of this, the framework, the technology, the support, the compliance and security, the governance, and business can drive everything in the middle. So now that IT has sort of set the sandbox, business can work within that sandbox to really go and drive innovation for their use cases and business objectives. So a couple of things here just to look at what are the steps in defining your strategy, or where do you really start? And first and foremost, I think you got to recognize and be honest in assessing your organization's readiness for mobility, because it goes beyond just the devices and people using them and making sure you have enough devices, but that you have your infrastructure and even your policies within your organization set up, getting back to legal and so on, and HR for that matter, making sure your enterprise policies are set up for mobility. We classify things kind of a mobile 1.0, 2.0, 3.0 basis, just to paint a picture of what a maturity level can look like within an organization. And a lot of organizations are sitting at this 1.0 level. Not a bad thing. That doesn't mean you're not mature necessarily, but this is a set of applications maybe that are the good quick hits. You know, how do you define and achieve some early successes around mobile applications? So some of these are single function applications, just quick and easy applications that integrate readily to your back end. Probably have very little development on your back end whatsoever. They're just front end mobile development. And then moving all the way to mobile 3.0, where we're really looking at things that change your enterprise, drive innovation, end-to-end transformation. In this case, you are probably standing up systems specifically to support your mobile applications, or integrating into systems that are really supporting your business, like your ERP systems. So just being honest and assessing your capabilities and making sure you know where to put the right pressure as you develop your strategy. We want to solve the hard problems once. There are some things that we can do, not only from an application perspective, creating some enterprise libraries, let's say, but also from networking policy, all those types of things, to make sure that we solve these challenges once and we can reuse them across all of our different applications. So how are we going to authenticate to the back end? How is authorization going to be handled? What's our primary way of integrating to all these back end systems? And then deployment and support. Enterprise app stores. You know, after a certain amount of applications, it's pretty hard to go around everybody's device and PC and iTunes and figure out how you're going to install this application. You need to stand up an enterprise app store and deliver the apps through that channel. And the other thing is to integrate design into the process. So just like code development, where mobile is a very good fit for an iterative development methodology, we also need design to be in there as well. And we need design to iterate in addition to that. I don't know if you saw the Xamarin blog post about Xamarin Studio and how they iterated through their design for Studio and came up with the ultimate design that's implemented today. But that same thing happens to occur. We work in a lot of places where design is kind of done up front, and then you kind of waterfall into development and so on. And what happens is you have to go back and retool the design because you figure out some things later in development or later in testing that just don't work. So design has to parallel, much like we did with testing, right? In the olden days of development, we used to put testing at the far end. I know it's still done today. But testing is really brought up into the front end of the project. So testers are part of the requirements gathering sessions, so that they can make sure they can test those requirements and validate that the application performs. Design has to mimic that very similarly. So I'll just wrap up here with some steps to success. One is form a mobility council. We talked about how that's that cross-sectional group of people across your organization to talk about mobility. And that group of people might also include some outside experts as well. So your partners, your integration partners, your development partners, consultants, business consultants may also be part of that mobility council. But that group of people is really going to be the team that needs to continually establish and then continually improve on that mobile strategy. Prioritizing the activities of the group meant looking at that, sort of periodic table of all those different things that really need to be considered. Where are you going to start? They all can't be done at once. So where do we start? What are the priorities, and where do we apply the time and resources to make sure the right things get done at the right time? Starting small, get something in the door, make it successful, even if it's a small group of users. But build excitement around mobility in your enterprise and the team developing it, and be able to have that quick win. Build on that success and build progressively more features into the applications and think bigger and more innovatively within the enterprise so that you can grow your mobile footprint. And once again, refine and improve. The strategy can't just be set up once and then just left on its own to be delivered. You have to go back and continually revisit it, understand what's changed in your enterprise, what's changed with the market conditions and the trends that are influencing things, and go on and improve that strategy so that you can go back and execute these steps over and over again. So that's those are really the key steps and in defining the strategy, and I think essential steps for you getting started there. So I want to thank you certainly, and I have a few minutes here I think for any questions, and I'm happy to address anything on either the strategy side of things, our Cognizant's Future of Work campaign, mobile platforms, technology. I'm an architect, I'm a developer. I'm happy to give my thoughts, opinions, and bias on anything you want to talk about as well.
Apps or responsive design, which one are you betting on?
Well, the consulting answer is it depends, right? Responsive design is important for certain types of apps. So here's a good example. In enterprise applications, we're going to talk about having hundreds of mobile applications. Well, if you think of all the different functions you can do as an employee, from an HR perspective, or from interacting with a system, or I'm a certain type of worker, what am I going to interact with, and what are the apps I need? Am I going to develop one monolithic app, or am I going to have a lot of small apps? And this is one of the challenges in the mobile enterprises today, is if I have 100 apps or 100 use cases, do I have 100 little icons on my screen that I'm going to sift through? Well, all of those aren't necessarily good applications. They can be good web, more of a portal type of approach to solving those problems if they're very constrained and manageable. But when you get into those mission critical apps, or use cases, I should even say, well, then that gets to be more of an app model, I think. And so responsive design can be important for those, for that portal style of mobile applications. But when you really get into the guts of the mission critical apps you need to write, it almost, it turns on its head, I think. You start with native rather than starting with HTML5, which is. So go ahead. Oh.
You mentioned, in the title of your talk, wow, you mentioned you have the word future, but I didn't hear too much about the future or where you think, say, app development or app use within large corporations is going.
Yeah,
could you comment on that?
I think the important thing from a strategy perspective is to understand what trends are influencing. And trends kind of start to look at what the future is bringing. So we see what technology trends, we see what employee trends, what's happening in the workforce. Workforce trends are influencing enterprises, and then the strategy's got to adapt to that. And so the future is, tomorrow's the future, right? And so is next year. And so the question is how far we reach out. And so one of the things that's important to think about in mobility strategy is, well, how far do you reach out? What are devices going to be looking? Does anyone know what devices or operating systems are going to be prevalent in 2 years? If you look at history, you don't know. So what do we know about the future with respect to devices? And that's why having a strategy of cross-platform development is very critical, I think. Because if you put in all your resources into a single platform, that platform could change drastically one way or another. So even if that platform's still valid in the future, it might not be backward compatible with everything you've done. So having some abstraction in the way you develop your applications can be very critical. Even if you say, we are an iOS-only shop, so why would we do anything but Objective-C? Well, if you use a tool like Xamarin, for instance, it's going to insulate you a little bit because your code base isn't going to be as tied to that. So you can have that abstraction and insulation from changes being made in some of those platforms. And the same thing would apply with HTML5. So that would be, mobile future is not, the big drastic changes in the future of mobility, I think, are not that far away. And we don't know what they're necessarily going to be, especially with how secretive some companies are about their platform changes. So we as an enterprise have to think strategically to make sure that we can adapt and that we're not going down the wrong path too far or too deep with one particular approach, that we can adjust it when something changes. Yeah.
Hey there. So just a quick question for you. What sort of tactics do you guys use for larger organizations that are seemingly entrenched in this idea that, we need to maintain, let's say, all of our data in-house, and the cloud is dangerous and scary, and they kind of feel the same way about mobile. Mobile is what I use when I'm in the car with my kids and they want to play a game. You know what I mean? And so I feel like everyone knows that we need to go in that direction, but it's kind of hard to, even though being a technology person, I know that things are safe, and mobile's way beyond where it was before. What tactics do you use to kind of convince those types of people that that's where we need to be?
Sure.
Thanks.
So, a big part of that is education, right? What you don't know, you may fear. So you've heard stories maybe that certain devices or operating systems aren't as secure, or you're talking to your CIO buddy at another corporation, and he had this terrible implementation experience doing mobility, and here's the problems it caused. So part of that is education. I'd say, one strategy or tactic there really for overcoming that is some success, some way to say, is there something we can do that's small, safe, controlled, that you can take and have an early success with and build upon that success. And depending on the industry you're in, we do see that pushback, particularly in those very highly regulated industries, financial or healthcare, let's say. There is some warranted fear in some cases, but there's also, I think, the need and the need to understand that you've got to drive your organization in this direction, or you lose out on all this time of innovation and experience in working with mobility. And that's, like I said, that kind of understanding is going to build more trust and confidence in why we should go about it.
Hi. As a consultant, my historic experience has been a lot of companies, they want the web. They want the web first. And then I'd say it's web 80% of the time, and then 20% of work is mobile. Are you guys at Cognizant, or did I say it right? Yeah. Are you guys seeing any trends towards a mobile-first strategies, or are you still primarily seeing we're building a web app and we'll worry about mobile?
Yeah, it's a challenge today. Not all your users are going to be able to access your information, whatever it is, through mobile. So what do you do? In some respects, well, great, mobility is awesome, but now we've added extra work because we need to do it on web and mobile. And if we do it make it web-centric HTML5 and just say, hey, mobile users, go ahead and hit that, we're not getting the user experience we want. So how do we solve both problems? Well, it is a problem. So there are not only tools and platforms that can assist here, but there are approaches in an enterprise. One is just understanding you're going to have to support multiple channels. So what are the things that can you do in an infrastructure level in your enterprise to support multiple channels, everything from web to mobility to voice and everything else, so that you can quickly bring up services no matter what channel they are. Your business logic, your data, everything like that's behind the scenes, and you're really, a lot of it's just really the user experience that you're developing for, not the business logic and process that goes behind it. You leverage that once, and you allow that to come up through all those different channels, and we built so much of our infrastructure around web in the last 10 years or so that now we're having to revisit that, and some shops have done this very well. They've got great abstraction between their web tiers and all the integration behind the scenes. And other places, it's spaghetti code, right? You've got UI and business logic mixed in there, and there's no tearing them apart. So now what do we do? And you call Cognizant. No, it's this is a very typical problem for many enterprises, and so certainly is a challenge there. Sure, sorry. So mobile first, are we seeing any trends there? In places, so the application, the use cases will be very specific that it just makes sense. Would we like to drive people to mobile first? I'm not sure that's necessarily correct for a lot of things. Once again, you got to look at the use case. If the use case is, well, my field force is going to be out and they need access to information, yeah, it's mobile only. But am I delivering information to my customers mobile first and then something else, or mobile only? It's really going to depend. So it's going to be very focused on certain use cases where we look at mobile first or mobile only. Wonderful. Well, thank you all for coming, and I'll be around the conference the next couple of days. I have two of my comrades in the back here, Jeff Wallace, who is the practice leader for Cognizant Mobility, and Prashant Kabadi, who is our alliances leader. We're happy to chat with you on anything you've heard today and more if you just bend our ear. So thank you very much.